It all began on a typical summer night in Boston. Emily, 24-year-old college student, was at home with her younger sister Sophie, 13, and brother Ethan, 17. Their parents had gone on a 2-week anniversary trip, leaving the 3 siblings alone. What should have been a peaceful fortnight turned into a nightmare beyond their wildest imagination. On the first night, Emily woke with a start to a strange noise coming from the hallway. It sounded like something scraping against the walls. Initially, she dismissed it as her imagination playing tricks on her. After all, the old house always made odd noises. But when she opened her bedroom door to check, her heart nearly stopped. There was Sophie, clinging to the wall like a giant gecko, her eyes glazed over and lifeless. Emily slammed the door shut, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. She ran to Ethan's room, waking him in a panic. "There's something wrong with Sophie," she whispered, trembling. Ethan, still groggy, thought his sister was overreacting. "It must have been a nightmare," he mumbled, turning over. But Emily knew what she had seen was real. Too real. The next morning, Sophie acted as if nothing had happened. She ate breakfast normally, laughing and joking as usual. Emily watched her sister closely, looking for any sign that something was amiss. There was nothing. Sophie was the same cheerful girl as always. Had Emily really imagined it all? As the days passed, Emily began to notice subtle changes in Sophie's behavior. The once active and sociable girl now spent most of her day sleeping. When she did wake up, usually late in the afternoon, she was irritable and distant. Emily tried to talk to her several times, but Sophie always changed the subject or simply ignored her sister. Ethan, on the other hand, remained skeptical. "She's a teenager, Em. It's normal for her to act a bit different," he said, trying to calm his older sister. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong with Sophie, and she was determined to find out what it was. One night, Emily decided to stay awake to observe Sophie. Hidden in the hallway, she saw her sister's bedroom door slowly open. What emerged looked nothing like the sweet Sophie she knew. The figure had limbs contorted at impossible angles, completely black eyes, and a blank expression on its face. Emily watched in horror as the creature that was once her sister began to climb the walls, moving like a giant spider. The sound of nails scraping against plaster echoed through the house, making Emily shudder. She wanted to scream, to run, but she was paralyzed with fear. The creature descended to the kitchen, and Emily, summoning all her courage, silently followed. What she saw made her swallow a scream of horror. Sophie was crouched on the kitchen floor, voraciously devouring a piece of raw meat. When she sensed Emily's presence, she turned slowly, black eyes fixed on her sister. Emily ran back to her room, locking the door. Her heart was beating so loud she was sure Sophie, or whatever that thing was, would hear it. She spent the rest of the night awake, eyes fixed on the door, fearing that, at any moment, the creature might enter. When the sun finally rose, Emily was exhausted but relieved. At breakfast, Sophie acted as if nothing had happened. She smiled at Emily, asked for pancakes, and talked about her plans for the day. Emily observed her sister, trying to reconcile the image of the sweet girl before her with the horrifying creature she had seen the night before. How was this possible? Was she going crazy? Desperate for help, Emily decided to call her best friend, Rachel. "You won't believe what's happening," she said, as soon as Rachel answered. Emily poured out the whole story, her voice trembling with every word. On the other end of the line, Rachel listened in silence, interrupting only to ask a few questions. When Emily finished, there was a long pause. "Em, have you ever heard of demonic possession?" Rachel finally asked. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. Possession? That was something from horror movies, not real life. But the more she thought about it, the more sense it made. Strange behavior, the supernatural abilities, the personality change, it all fit. Rachel suggested that Emily seek help from a paranormal expert. "I know someone who can help," she said. "His name is Dr. Michael Stone. He's a respected paranormal investigator. I'll give you his contact information." Emily thanked her, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Finally, she would have help, but what if this Dr. Stone didn't believe her? That afternoon, Emily called Dr. Stone. She expected him to treat her like she was crazy, but to her surprise, Dr. Stone listened to her story seriously. "This sounds like a severe case," he said after Emily finished her account. I'll come over tonight with my team. We can set up cameras around the house to document what's happening. Do you think you can keep your sister at home? Emily agreed, although the thought of spending another night with the monstrous version of Sophie terrified her. When night fell, Dr. Stone and his team arrived at the house. They brought sophisticated equipment: infrared cameras, audio recorders, and motion sensors. We'll set everything up before it gets dark, Dr. Stone said, beginning to distribute the equipment around the house. Ethan, still skeptical, watched the commotion with doubt. Do you really think this will help, Em? He asked, but Emily was determined. I don't know, Ethan, but we have to try. Something is very wrong with Sophie, and we can't just ignore it. Ethan shook his head, resigned, and helped Dr. Stone install the sensors. In the days that followed, Sophie began to recover. Her strange behaviors diminished, and she returned to being the cheerful girl she was before. However, Emily remained vigilant, always on the lookout for any sign that the spirit might be trying to return. Dr. Stone made regular visits to monitor the situation and reinforce the protections. A week later, while Dr. Stone was conducting a new inspection of the house, he found something worrying. There's a cold spot here, he said, pointing to a specific area in Sophie's room. This could be a residual portal. We need to close it immediately. Dr. Stone and his team began to prepare a new ritual to seal the portal. During the ritual, the house shook slightly, as if resisting the closing of the portal. Sophie, watching closely, began to feel a slight headache. Dr. Stone, something's happening to Sophie, Emily said, worried. Dr. Stone looked at Sophie, noticing that her eyes were beginning to darken again. Quick, finish the ritual, he ordered. With a final powerful chant, the portal was closed and the house returned to normal. Sophie fainted, but Dr. Stone assured them that this was expected. She'll be fine, he said. Portal has been closed and the entity will no longer be able to reach her. Emily and Ethan sighed in relief, feeling that they were finally safe. Dr. Stone left final instructions and departed, promising to return for more checkups. Emily and Ethan were grateful for his help. I don't know what we would have done without you, Dr. Stone, Emily said. He smiled. I'm glad we could help. Take good care of her and yourselves. And with that, he left, leaving the house safer than ever. Over time, life returned to normal for Emily, Ethan, and Sophie. The girl went back to school, made new friends, and seemed happier than ever. Emily, though still attentive, began to relax, finally feeling that the nightmare was over. The house, once gloomy and oppressive, now seemed like a place of safety and comfort. Emily and Ethan decided to tell their parents everything when they returned from their trip. It was a difficult time, but we managed to get through it together, Emily said. The parents were shocked and concerned, but relieved to know that Sophie was safe. We'll make sure this never happens again, they said, hugging their children. Even with everything seemingly resolved, Emily couldn't help but think about all that had happened. She began to study more about the occult, determined to better understand what they had faced. She wanted to be prepared for any future eventuality, protecting herself and her family. During one of these research sessions, Emily found an old diary, written by someone who had faced a similar situation. The descriptions in the diary were frighteningly similar to Sophie's experiences. Maybe this can help me understand better, she thought, starting to read the diary carefully. The nights became more peaceful, but Emily always kept the amulets nearby. Ethan returned to focusing on his studies and friends, while Sophie, now more self-aware, also showed interest in learning more about the forces that had affected her. We want to be prepared, the siblings said. Months passed without incident. Family's life returned to normal, and the terror seemed like a distant memory. Emily and Dr. Stone kept in touch, and he was always willing to help if anything strange happened again. So far, everything was peaceful. I think we really did it, Emily said one day, feeling genuine happiness. But the peace was interrupted by an unexpected incident. On a quiet night, the motion sensors installed by Dr. Stone began to beep. Emily woke up with a start, running to Sophie's room. To her relief, Sophie was sleeping peacefully. It must be a false alarm, she thought, but decided to check the other rooms. In the hallway, she found Ethan, also awakened by the alarm. What's going on? He asked, yawning. I don't know, but let's check the cameras, Emily replied. They went to the central monitor and reviewed the recordings. A dark figure briefly appeared in the living room before disappearing. "This isn't a good sign," Emily said, worried. The next morning, Emily contacted Dr. Stone. "Something strange happened last night," she explained. Dr. Stone, always willing to help, promised to return to the house for a new inspection. "It could be a residual entity or just a system failure, but we'll check," he assured. Emily hoped it was just a technical problem. Dr. Stone arrived that afternoon, bringing new equipment. "We're going to investigate all the rooms again," he said, starting with the living room where the figure was seen. The team spent hours inspecting every corner of the house but found nothing abnormal. "Everything seems to be in order," Dr. Stone finally said. "Maybe it was just a glitch." Despite the apparent tranquility, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She decided to continue with her research, trying to understand more about residual entities and how to deal with them. Ethan, trying to comfort his sister, said, "We'll be fine, Em." Dr. Stone said he didn't find anything. That night, Emily had a disturbing dream. She was back in the hallway, watching Sophie transform into a horrible creature again. She woke up with a scream, cold sweat covering her body. It was just a dream, she told herself, trying to calm her racing heart. But the fear persisted. Emily decided to be proactive. She talked to Dr. Stone about the possibility of performing a purification ritual in the house to ensure that any remnant of negative energy was eliminated. "It can't hurt to try," he agreed, and together they planned the ritual for the weekend. Ethan and Sophie also participated, wanting to help in any way they could. The ritual was performed with care and precision. Dr. Stone recited chants, sprinkled holy water, and used incense to purify the house. Atmosphere became lighter, and everyone felt a renewed peace. "I think this really helped," Sophie said, smiling. Emily finally felt that the house was free from any threat. Family continued to live in peace, but always with discreet vigilance. Dr. Stone made regular visits, and the amulets remained in use. Emily, now wiser and more prepared, felt capable of facing anything. "We're ready for whatever comes," she said confidently, as she watched her sister play in the backyard, finally free from the terror that had almost destroyed her. Emily, now relieved, returned to attending college without worries. Coming home one night, she saw the gate of her house open, and further ahead, the front door also ajar. Alarmed, she ran inside and found Sophie motionless in the corner of the living room, facing the wall. Her heart raced as she saw the trail of blood trickling down the stairs. The scene on the first floor, as she climbed the stairs, was so horrific that Emily fell to her knees, there on the floor, powerless, her eyes filled with tears and lifeless. The walls were smeared with blood, and scattered across the floor were the dismembered remains of her parents and brother. In the center of the carnage stood Sophie, her body twisted unnaturally, her eyes black as night and a sinister smile spreading across her face. As Emily's world shattered around her, she realized with crushing despair that the evil they thought they had vanquished had only been biding its time, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash its true horror.